When you're on a construction site, what's the most important thing you're actually building? It's not the walls, it's not the roof, it's the foundation of safety that protects every single person there. Because without that, everything else, well, it's just at risk. Today, we're going to dig into the essential blueprint for that safety foundation, Indian Standard 13416. This is the guide for creating a worksite that's truly secure.
So let's talk about IS 14116. Honestly, you should think of it as the ultimate playbook for handling the biggest hazards you face on any civil or construction job. I mean, you know how it is. The site changes every single day. New people, new equipment. Just reacting to problems as they pop up, that's a recipe for disaster. This standard is all about being proactive. It gives us a system to find and shut down risks before anyone gets hurt.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it down. We've got 5 key parts. First, we'll tackle falling material hazards. Then, we'll get into preventing falls for our people. After that, safe debris disposal, which is a bigger deal than you might think. Then, we'll cover the specifics of timber structure integrity. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with proactive fire protection. You'll see how these all lock together to form a complete system. Ready? Let's get into it.
Okay, part 1, falling material hazards. This is a big one. On any site with more than one level, this is a constant threat. And let's be real, gravity doesn't play favorites. A simple wrench dropped from a few stories up, that can be lethal. So this first part is all about locking down the site, from the highest point right down to the ground. And the scope here is, well, it's perfectly clear. This isn't just a list of don'ts. It's about getting to the root of the problem. It forces us to ask why and where materials fall from in the first place. The whole point is to build layers of protection to stop an incident before it even has a chance to start. And in our line of work, that proactive mindset, that's the whole game. So where are the biggest danger zones? I mean, it's tempting to just say everywhere, right? But that's not exactly helpful when you're trying to make a plan. What's great about this standard is how specific it gets. It points out the exact hotspots, which lets us, as safety pros, really focus our risk assessments and put our resources where they'll do the most good.
And here's the list. It's pretty exhaustive, covering just about everything you can think of. You've got your usual suspects, right? Scaffolds, hoists, ladders. But it also makes you think about the things you might miss, like an open hole in the floor that someone could just accidentally kick a piece of debris into, or even something as routine as unloading a truck. The standard really zeroes in on improperly stacked materials, a pallet of bricks on a slight incline, or right at the edge of a slab. That's just a disaster waiting to happen. This is your go-to checklist for your daily site walk.
Okay, now this is where it gets really smart. What you're looking at here is a multi-layered defense. If you're familiar with the hierarchy of controls, you'll see it right here. It starts with the strongest stuff, engineering controls. That means designing and building scaffolds correctly in the first place. Then you've got administrative controls, which are all about your processes, like how you stack materials and making it a hard rule that no one throws waste from height. And finally, you have the physical barriers and PPE, the safety nets, the tool lanyards. See? It's a complete system that builds safety right into the job, instead of just slapping it on as an afterthought.
All right, let's shift gears to part 2. So we've talked about stuff falling on people. Now let's talk about people themselves falling. This is about protecting our most valuable asset out there, our team. And again, look how practical the scope is. It's all about breaking down the different types of falls. And that's so important, right? Because falling into an excavation needs totally different controls than someone slipping on a wet surface. By categorizing the risks, the standard lets us pinpoint the exact right solution for each one. And man, that is so crucial, because falls are still one of the absolute biggest causes of fatalities in our industry. So it boils down to 4 main types of falls. First, you've got your falls from heights, scaffolds, roofs, the obvious stuff. Then falls into things, excavations, lift shafts, you name it. Third, and this is a sneaky one, is falling through surfaces. Think about fragile roof panels, super high risk. And finally, and don't ever overlook this, are falls on flat ground, slips, trips. They might not sound as dramatic, but they happen all the time and cause some nasty injuries. Each one needs its own game plan.
I love this quote from the standard. It really hits home. Ladders, right? We use them so often they become almost invisible. We just stop thinking about the risk. It's that classic complacency trap. But this is a sharp reminder that ladders are a huge source of accidents, and it's almost always down to something simple. Someone overreaching just a little bit, or not setting it up right to begin with.
So, to fight that complacency, the standard, referencing IS 3696, gives us a solid checklist. It's not just about grabbing any old ladder, it's about the setup. Is it on firm ground? Do you have that 4-to-1 angle? That's super important. For every 4 feet up, the base is 1 foot out.
And the weekly checks, that's not just ticking a box. You're actively hunting for cracks, loose rungs, anything that could cause a failure. It's about bringing real discipline to a task we do every single day. And this is why this standard is so useful. It gets specific. It doesn't just say use guardrails. It says they have to be a minimum of 900 millimeters high. That's about 3 feet. And there's a reason for that specific number. It's designed to be higher than the average person's center of gravity, which makes it a lot harder to just topple over. This isn't a guideline. It's a hard number you can measure and check. It's a reliable, physical barrier. And here's a perfect example of how everything in the standard connects. That little 100 millimeter toe board, it's genius. First, it stops a hammer or a bolt from getting kicked off the edge. That connects right back to part 1, falling objects. Second, it stops a worker's foot from sliding out under the rail, which is all about part 2, preventing falls. It's such a simple little thing, but it does double duty. Incredibly effective design. All right, on to part 3. Let's talk about mulba, or construction waste. It's so easy to overlook, but a messy site is a dangerous site. We're talking trip hazards everywhere, massive fire risks. Heck, if you pile it up in the wrong place, you can even create structural issues. This standard gives us a proper system for handling it from start to finish.
Step 1 is simple. Sort your waste. You just can't have one giant pile of everything. The standard is clear. You have to segregate. Keep the sharp stuff, glass, nails, separate so nobody gets cut. Keep your heavy concrete and brick separate from the light rubbish, and most importantly, anything hazardous or toxic gets its own special, isolated area. This isn't just about making recycling easier. It's about making sure every type of waste is handled the right way to prevent injuries and other nasty surprises.
So once it's sorted, the debris goes on a little journey, a 5-stage journey. And the key word here is control at every step. First, bringing it down. You use chutes, you use hoists. You never just throw it, period. Then it gets dumped into a designated, fenced-off area on site. When it's loaded onto a truck, that truck has to be covered. That's to keep dust and junk from flying all over public roads. And the final stop? An approved disposal site. It's like a chain of custody for that waste, from the moment it's created to the moment it's gone.
And let me be clear, these precautions aren't just nice-to-haves. They're non-negotiable. Fencing off the area where a chute drops? That's just common sense. Misting down fine dust with water? That's a simple trick to control deadly silica dust. And that point about not overloading floors? A pile of concrete rubble weighs a ton. Literally, you could cause a collapse. Even the rule about taking from the top of the pile first, that's straight out of the excavation safety playbook, designed to stop the whole thing from sliding down on someone.
Okay, let's switch to part 4, all about timber structures. Wood is an amazing material, but it's got its own quirks, right? It splits, it has knots, and its strength really depends on how you treat it. So this part of the standard walks us through the safety rules for the whole process, from the moment the lumber arrives on site to the final piece going up. This right here perfectly shows how being safe and being efficient are often the same thing. Trying to cut with a dull saw, you have to push harder, which means you're more likely to slip. Using a hammer with a loose head, that thing could fly off and become a missile. Bad tools don't just slow you down, they are an accident waiting to happen. The standard makes it clear. A well-kept tool is a safe tool. It's full of practical tips, like pre-drilling holes in hardwood so your nail doesn't bend and shoot back at you. Now for carpenters up high, the standard covers the basics, PPE, nets, all that. But it also gives some really specific advice for their trade. Check this out. Using something simple like bamboo poles to create a temporary foothold on a sloped roof. That's not something you'd find in a generic textbook. That comes from real-world job site experience. And of course, it stresses clear signals when lifting and the absolute golden rule. Never ever use a fragile roofing sheet as a step. Okay, this is a really cool technical point that shows you how deep this standard goes. It knows that wood isn't perfect, it's got knots. So if you're putting in a structural beam, it tells you to place the wood so the knot is in the compression zone. That's the top half that gets squeezed. You want to keep knots out of the tension zone at the bottom where the beam is being stretched because that's where it could fail. That's some expert-level safety knowledge built right into the construction method itself. And that brings us to our final piece of the puzzle, Part 5, Proactive Fire Protection. A construction site is basically the perfect recipe for a fire, isn't it? You've got sparks from welding, tons of fuel like wood scraps and cardboard, and usually it's not easy for a fire truck to get in. This part of the standard tackles that whole mess head-on.
First, it points out the usual suspects. Welding, cutting, any kind of hot work is number 1 on the list. But look what else is there. Bad temporary wiring. That is such a huge one. It's often put in a hurry, it gets run over by equipment, it's out in the rain, it's just asking for a short circuit. Then you've got your classics, careless storage of flammable liquids, and people smoking where they shouldn't be. These all need tight controls and procedures.
So how do we manage these risks? With one simple, powerful idea. Keep things separate. The standard lays it out. 15 meters. That's the magic number. Flammable liquids, gas cylinders, explosives all have to be at least 15 meters away from your main buildings. Even your scrap burn pile needs a 12-meter buffer. Why? It's all about buying time. If a fire starts in your gas storage, that distance gives people time to get out and for someone to call for help before it reaches the main structure.
When it comes to the really high-risk jobs, the rules get even tighter. If someone is welding, everything flammable has to be cleared out of a 10-meter circle around them. No exceptions. And here's a great detail. Oily rags. They have to go into a sealed metal can and be removed every single day. That's to prevent spontaneous combustion, where the rags can literally just catch fire by themselves as the oil oxidizes. At the end of the day, it all boils down to good housekeeping. A clean site is a fire-safe site.
And finally, what happens if prevention fails? You've got to be ready to respond. That means having the right fire extinguishers for the right kind of fire, a good water supply, and keeping the roads clear for a fire truck. But honestly, the most important thing on this list is training. A fire extinguisher is just a red can if nobody knows how to use it confidently. You have to run drills, you have to practice your emergency plan. That's what turns a piece of paper into a real, life-saving response.
So, when you look back at all 5 parts, you can see they're not just separate rules, are they? They're all connected. Remember the tow board? It stops tools from falling and people from slipping. Cleaning up debris? That gets rid of trip hazards and fuel for a fire. It's all one big integrated system designed to build a real culture of safety from the ground up.
Look, this standard is the blueprint. It gives you all the technical details you need for a safe site. But a blueprint on a desk has never built anything, right? The real work, the real challenge is making this stuff happen out there day in and day out. So I'll leave you with this question. How are you going to take these principles and build more than just a physical structure? How are you going to build a lasting culture where every single person on your crew sees safety as their #1 job?